So this is a redo. I know that earlier I kind of cut my broadcast short. I wanted to start out first by saying that I was fasting today. I wasn't really, first of all, I wasn't eating or drinking at all. So what did I do? I didn't sit in front of a TV because I don't have a TV anyway anymore. But I also didn't go to the gym, where a lot of Sundays I'll just go and watch the game on the screen. I didn't go to the bar. I ended up going to work and getting caught up on some things that I'd missed over 3 days of religious holiday and technically a vacation. So I was pretty much listening to a lot of the videos that I'd missed over the weekend, including Lionel Nation's videos and Sticks, Axe, and Hammers. So what I was not doing was basically watching football. And I didn't necessarily miss it. I was tracking it a little on my fantasy tracker, Yahoo, and I started to realize that really the NFL has become kind of a joke. And I guess, well, that's not new for today. I've been starting to realize that for a number of months already. But let's go through a little progression of topics. So the holiday that I just celebrated was Rosh Hashannah. I could tell you that 2 hours ago, I was at the supermarket and I just checked out, and I was wheeling my cart out of the store, and this guy was like coming up to me, a middle-aged black guy, and kind of signaled that he needed to ask me a question. He was asking me, what about these pomegranates? There were all these pomegranates. First of all, he asked me, are you Jewish? Now, I was wearing a Cowboys hat and this. I don't know how he, chose to ask me. Maybe because I was only a non-white person at the store at the time. I don't know if there were any other or non-black people. I was one of the only, like the grocery store I go to is mostly it is a mixed crowd, but at the times of the day, there are no white people there. It's just the way it is. I've noticed it before. There's times of the day where there's tons of people of one race or another. Some times of the day, there's only white people. Sometimes of the day, there's only black people. It's just weird. I don't know why it is that way. I don't know if there's any specific reason. But this guy saw me wheeling away. He was an employee. And he asked, why is it that the Jews were buying all these pomegranates last week? And I explained to him that on Rosh Hashannah, which is our New Year's starts every year in the September to October time frame. Usually the latest it will be the beginning of October, and that's because Judaism follows a lunar calendar that starts in September or October, depending on how the year falls out. And we have a leap year where we'll have a whole month. That's, I think, every 4 years. So then you might ask me, so what's the deal with these pomegranates, like this guy did? So a pomegranate has many seeds, and maybe I'll get an image of it. A pomegranate has many seeds on the inside. It's kind of hard to eat. You have to get all of the there's like this, how do I explain it? If you see here, let me show the screen. You have all this excess waste product on the on the inside. You see this white stuff over here. If you're following my cursor, I don't know if you can even see my cursor. Hold on. You guys see it now? I don't think you can see it. You can't see my cursor for sure, but you can see the white area inside. That's like the waste product, and all the red, these are the seeds. So the reason that Jews will eat pomegranates on Rosh Hashannah, on the New Year's, is because it is a segula. The segula, I guess, is I've heard it translated as a charm or as I don't know what to call it, that you'll have as many good deeds to your credit as there are seeds of a pomegranate. It's a very simple metaphor. And we have other fruits that we eat for various other things. Often, some of them are more to keep our oppressors off of us. One of them is to get rid of our haters. It's kind of one of the more odd customs that I've seen compared to what I used to think about it as a pluralistic religion. What's not a pluralistic religion? It's a religion based on concrete traditions. So today, why was I fasting? There was this person back in the time of the Babylonian conquest of Judea. His name was Gladio, the son of Ahikam. And when the emperor of Babylon went and conquered Judea, he left a small remnant of the people there and took the elites and the nobility and the royals and most of the skilled people to Babylon into exile. That's why, if you listen to Bob Marley, what does he have? He has that album, By the Rivers of Babylon. I think he has a song, By the Rivers of Babylon, for example. It's all about the Babylonian exile in the Bible. And he's not a Jewish artist. At least I think that there are rumors that his father's family has Jewish roots or something. Not that I really care, because Bob Marley, honestly, so many rumors about his life. He's kind of one of those weird artists like Jim Morrison that there's more myth about him than there is truth. But the myth of Babylon was very powerful. Well, what happened to the people that were left was that they were placed under this governor named Gladio, the son of Ahikam, Ben Ahikam. And he went and stated to the people, look, we are in a horrible situation. Our temple was razed to the ground by the Babylonians, so we can't offer sacrifices to the Lord. So, okay, we're going to have to get by as it is. And he was saying, well, we're going to form a new community, and we're going to stay together with each other. And he was one of those accommodationist politicians. Well, he was murdered by a rebel, a nationalist, who was in the employ of one of the neighboring peoples of Ammon, I think. And it basically ended. After that, the Babylonians came in, or the people fled to Egypt. The rest of the people fled to Egypt, and only a tiny remnant remained in Judea, which is in the land of Israel. And that's basically how the Babylonian exile, just became even worse. So that's the fast of Gedalia, Tzom Gedalia, as we call it. That's why I was fasting today, and it's very poignant, to talk about this holiday, very auspicious right after the new year, when we live in a country that's very divided, where things like this happen all the time. I mean, how much political violence have we been getting used to in the past year? Maybe it's been going on longer, but honestly, today there was this murder in Tennessee. I don't know if there were more than one victim, but the truth is, we have this Sudanese immigrant was arrested for shooting up a white church in Tennessee. One woman was killed, 7 other people were hurt. And this is why I don't believe in hate crimes legislation, regardless of who is the victim and who is the perpetrator, because ultimately the motivation for the crime, it doesn't make it any worse or better. You can make the argument that racial or religious hatred is worse than hating somebody for stealing your money, but ultimately these crimes, it's the same act, it's the same the same motivation. A lot of other murders that are not considered hate crimes. Think about those crimes where a spouse kills a wife kills her husband, or vice versa. A husband kills the wife. A lot of those cases, that wouldn't that be considered a hate crime if they were estranged and he hated her because she'd taken the children away, or vice versa? If a business partner kills one business partner is killed by the other. It could be hatred. You don't know. And I think it's a situation that people don't want to think about. Probably at the outset, I was looking at this. I was thinking, well, this could be another example of what happened in South Carolina a couple of years ago with the Dylan Roof shooting in Charleston, the Charleston church shooting. I was thinking, yeah, this could be some Yahoo, some white nationalist who went in and shot up a black church. Well, it could be the opposite in this case. It could be a black nationalist that shot up a white church. In my opinion, they're both equally, ridiculous reasons for shooting up a church. And the person who goes in and perpetrates this type of crime, I don't know what they're trying to accomplish for their cause. Maybe that their cause, if they have one, is merely to promote a hateful agenda and a hateful organization. So who's to say? After Columbine, there were a number of copycat incidents, and people were thinking, oh, now this trench coat mafia, this ridiculous group that these people were a part of, oh, they're going to spread. Well, for a while there was evidence that people wanted to copy this group, but the core ideology of this group was so hodgepodge and incoherent that ultimately. And so most of these school shootings, at least, they're perpetrated by these people that simply have a lot of simmering anger for whatever reason. So sometimes it's for because of bullying or whatever. But there was a shooting in my area in 2013, I think it was, perpetrated by a kid who was simply looking for attention. It killed, I think, 4 of his classmates. So that's all I have to say about the Nashville church shooting. It says here, I'll just show his photo for a moment. This is Robert Engel. This is a guy who was considered the hero, quote unquote, of the shooting because he attempted to obstruct the shooter, offer him, and was pistol whipped by him. This was Emmanuel Kadega Sampson, who is identified as the perpetrator. So I think that we're going to have, it's going to be interesting how long this conversation is going to be this week, because this is a person, he's an immigrant from Sudan. I'm not sure how long he's been here. I think I saw one report that he was here for 20 years from Sudan. I don't, by his name, I don't think that he's a Muslim, but I could be wrong. And, these events that keep happening, well, don't you think that there's now an issue with political violence or racial violence where you can't just blame one specific community all the time? Don't you think that now, because the obverse has occurred, where it's a black shooter that shot up a white church, that we really need to tone down all the rhetoric about, reparations, or that whiteness is the problem, or the other side of the coin, where people say, oh, we don't need, there's all these people who are trying to say that the blacks need to be separated out of our society, and there's all these people who say that they can never become productive. Well, unfortunately, I think those voices are always going to be around. However, instead of treating these people that have intolerant views as if they have some sort of leprosy, you do have to engage them and talk to them about forming a society that's based more on a civic attitude, an attitude of civil discourse is what I'm trying to say. So that's it for the this awful topic. Of course, there were these two other disasters that happened this weekend. Let me just go see if there's anybody in the chat, anybody at all. I know I kind of hold on. Let me just save this. Stay. Angel Muniz, hopefully I can join you in one of your live streams again soon. I don't think it's going to be today because I'm kind of, I'm trying to get through a lot of topics. But how about we try next week or something? So, I know that I saw you yesterday with your that song that you keep doing that drives me insane. But I think next week let's try for another one. We can also talk about the NFL. What's another topic that I was going to pick today? You can actually see it in the subject line. Well, the Mexico earthquake and the Hurricane Maria devastation in Puerto Rico are not getting much attention right now because of this overwhelming bullshit of the NFL, which we're also going to address. But if we really think about it, Mexico, people shouldn't really laugh at what's going on over there. And I don't think they are. I'm not trying to say that people are taking joy from the devastation in Mexico. But what I've been trying to say in some of my conversations with people all over the spectrum is that we as Americans, if we, depending on our attitude towards immigration, our goal is not to have Mexico become a hellhole. Our goal is to have a relationship where we don't have their people see their salvation being in leaving Mexico to the United States. Their poorest citizens should have an option to succeed in Mexico. Because otherwise, when you have a mass migration of people, doesn't matter from which country to which other country, you are going to have a lot of social problems because inevitably you get a situation where the host community is not prepared to absorb the new arrivals. They are culturally, they become culturally maladjusted, and typically they start to identify areas where they don't really see that they can advance in that society. It doesn't matter why. We live in a liberal world. Those of you conservatives out there, I'm sorry to tell you, the media, the education system, and much of the other social structure in the Western world has been dominated by liberal multiculturalism for decades. So whereas many of these immigrants from poorer countries, they used to come to the new country and be told, well, glad you could come. This is what you're going to do here. You're going to have a shit job, and maybe in the future your children can do better. And in certain generations, it was much harsher than that. When the Irish and the Chinese and the African slaves came here to the United States, the message was even worse. But let me put it this way: when Polish immigrants came here over decades, I think starting in the late 1800s, it's not as if the United States bent over backwards and started publishing all of its materials and information manuals in Polish in order to accommodate Polish immigrants. And the same thing for immigrants from China and from India. It's not as if we have millions of immigrants here from India. And by the way, India has many different languages, but it's not as if they demanded that the United States education system begin to publish all of these education manuals in Hindi or in Gujarati or any of the other languages there, Punjabi, Tamil. Those languages are probably even more difficult for an English speaker to understand than Spanish is, and vice versa. A person who's native Tamil speaking, probably not the easiest thing to pick up English initially because the language dynamics are a little different. But they still did it. And then they come here, or they stay here and they adapt to at least some of the social requirements of being an American citizen. Now, will they completely become an American in all respects culturally? Probably not. You know, and their sons and daughters who live here, will they become fully and authentically American? That's up for debate. Well, a lot of them do. There's a lot of people who grew up here. They're you know, the Daisy Americans, DESI, Daisy. I think that's how it's pronounced. It's either Desi or Daisy. And they live here in the United States, and they often do very well. I mean, the person who donated the business school where I went to college was an Indian immigrant, first generation Indian immigrant. Amazing story. Started an automotive transition parts manufacturing plant. He's donated an entire business school and an entire hospital. Think about that. So our goal is not to say, well, Mexico, you've suffered this disaster. Sucks to be you, because, well, the more disasters these people suffer, and I saw there was devastation across, first of all, Mexico City, then the province of Mexico. Mexico City is the largest city in the world, and then I think, what was the other province that was there? Not that you guys really are looking for those details. There's Chiapas, hit by a aftershock. Okay, so there are 73 deaths in Morelos, 45 in Puebla, 13 in the state of Mexico, and 6 in Guerrero, and 1 in Oaxaca. So this is a fairly large area of Mexico, the central areas of Mexico. Oaxaca, I think, is one of the more ancient or at least one of the more traditional and less modern cities in Mexico in terms of social culture. So if there's this massive humanitarian crisis in Mexico, where do you think these people are going to go? You know, as far as the deaths, okay, so those people, yeah, that's a huge tragedy in and of itself. But there's people without their homes. There's people without their schools. So I think it benefits the United States more to help the people of Mexico get back on their feet than to have Mexican people despair of their government and have to come here. Because ultimately, you know that it does cause friction with people here. And we already have tensions with Mexico. The United States and Mexico are already going through one of the worst periods in our history as neighbors. So I do think that it would benefit Donald Trump to go visit the president of Mexico, maybe in a neutral location or something, so that doesn't attract too much scorn, and hammer out an agreement on how to address their humanitarian needs. After all, Mexico did offer humanitarian aid after Hurricane Harvey, and of course there's the recent Hurricane Maria over in Puerto Rico. There was Hurricane Irma over in Florida. So this is unfortunately, it's the best opportunity possible for two countries that are in a bad patch of relations to really, you know, get together and work on some important things together instead of quibbling over just the immigration issue. So that's all I have to say about the disasters today. I think, you know, I just think it's a good moment for us to, you know, get in the huddle and work on common goals together, the United States and Mexico. Now for the German elections. I was not really following it that closely. I still am standing by my prediction that the next country that will attempt to leave the EU will be Italy. And that's regardless of what happens in Spain next month. The Italian people are not going to be taking this crap anymore. You just see outrage after outrage throughout Europe, and their resources are being sucked up by a population that just seems to keep coming, and there's no relief. And to be honest with you, their society is not geared towards absorbing new immigrants. They're a very stratified society, meaning that southern Italy, very poor, generational poverty, just neglect all over the place, more agricultural. Northern Italy, very industrialized, very rich. Neither portion of Italy is really culturally receptive towards a large immigrant population. I'd say the northern part of Italy is more so because there is a good amount of progressive activism there. There is a strong far left movement in Italy. For those of you that don't know, they've always had a very robust left-wing politics. They've always had a very robust right-wing political community. So Italy, I think, is still, in my opinion, the place where the European Union is going to go to die, because their society has already been so divided over political affiliations that there's going to be this movement in the middle of people that are going to say enough. You know, we are done being Europe's laboratory for immigration, and we don't care about these left-right political parties. We just want Italy to serve its own citizens. Now, what happened in Germany, which is what got me on this topic altogether, is that the German political system is traditionally ruled by two main parties, three if you count one of their subsidiaries. The main opposition party is the SPD, the Social Democratic Party of Germany, and they basically took a huge beating in this election. I'll look at the results here. So they took a massive beating. In fact, you could say that a lot of people lost in this election, and there was only one winner. In terms of, if you really want to talk about people that gained, the only real winner was this alternative for Germany. Let me just share this screen. So you can see here, they haven't updated it, but this is Angela Merkel, the current Chancellor of Germany. Hans Martin Schulz, or I think his name is just Martin Schulz. He's the leader of the opposition. And then there's the Alternative for Germany party, and you have the Free Democrats. They're a more liberal party. Then you have the Left Party. They're the inheritors of the Communist Party of East Germany. And you have the Greens, who are almost the same thing. So let's see if I can find a nice article for this. Many people were already fearing that there would be a massive, just here we go. Here's the actual vote. People were fearing that the right wing would get like a huge boost in the election. Well, of course, they have to get the boost at the expense of somebody else, and the somebody else was the traditional CDU-CSU. That's the ruling party of Angela Merkel and Horst Seehofer. Now, what is the ruling party in Germany? They're called the Christian Democratic Union, and they have an ally called the Christian Social Union, who are in Bavaria. Why is it that you have two parts of the same party? Well, Germany's traditionally divided, along north-south religious lines. The northern part of Germany is more Protestant and Lutheran. That's the Christian Democratic Union. Angela Merkel is a member of them. And then in Bavaria, and other parts of southern Germany, but mainly Bavaria, you have the Christian Social Union, who are mainly Catholic. And it's a reminder that Germany only united in the 1860s after a long, long saga of religious wars between the different principalities, or they were both religious and feudal wars. So under von Bismarck and the Kaiser Wilhelm, they united into one country, and you did have a multi-religious state. It wasn't always harmonious. You had to please a lot of people. Well, along comes the World War I kind of tossed that into the maelstrom, and because of the move to a republic, those identities have always been a little below the surface. There's the Bavarian identity where they say, well, okay, we're German too, but we're also Catholic. We're also Bavarian. We don't speak the same German as they do in Hamburg. And that simmering below the surface, it also created a counter movement. I mean, the German nationalist movement, and the Nazis were one of those movements, came about as people who were saying, no, there has to be a broader German identity. And that's how we got the rise of Hitler in the 1930s. And even more than that, that's why Germany expanded during the 30s and took over other parts of Europe, including the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia and Western Poland. And then they started to expand even more to areas where even non-German but so-called Aryan peoples were living, such as Norway and Denmark and whatever. It was a huge, change from, in the 1860s, Germany itself wasn't even a united country. Austria was an independent country. By 1942, Germany they'd absorbed Austria 4 years earlier, and they'd taken over countries that basically were not German. Like Yugoslavia, not a German country. So now, since after the war, there was a division of Germany between East and West. East Germany, ideologically communist. West Germany, they were trying to maintain a kind of Western democratic value system. That's where the CDU came in, the Christian Democratic Union. They were trying to unite the Germans around distinctly Western pro-tradition, but also for a little more of an open society. And this was as a counterbalance to the Soviet influence, and also in an answer to the National Socialism. So Germany was a more capitalist society, West Germany, after World War II. And lots of it was due to the policies of the CDU, the Christian Democratic Union, and their allies, the CSU. Who were the SPD? They were the successors of socialists from the pre-war era. And they wanted to build a welfare state in Germany as a counterbalance to Eastern communism, to Soviet communism. And their belief system was this, that, in order to prevent this rise of either a right-wing or left-wing dictatorship, you had to have a welfare state in order to keep people sort of in that nice sweet spot where they don't have to worry tomorrow about feeling hungry or getting their health care or their education. So under both of these parties, really, but mainly the SPD, the Social Democratic Party of Germany, they started building a welfare state, which has gradually changed Germany into what it is today, a multicultural society. They kind of throw tradition to the wind in many cases. Once in a while, Angela Merkel will pretend that she cares about German tradition. She doesn't really play true to that. This is a person who she has no children, and she's basically mortgaged the future of her country to the idea of a united Europe and a multicultural Europe. And you kind of see in that the roots of what we had today, this rise of a right-wing party alternative for Germany, alternative for Deutschland, as they're called in Germany. After the Cold War, Germany reunited, and you had very industrialized West absorbing Eastern Germany, which was kind of trying to adapt to a new culture. Most of the investment continued to be in West Germany, not in East Germany, which was largely dilapidated and neglected after the merging of the two countries. So with time, the far right started to take more and more of a role in the politics of East Germany, especially. Nowadays, also West Germany. The far right has always been mainly kind of the boogeyman in Germany, because they don't want to return to the Nazi past. But in East Germany, where there's been less opportunity and people are kind of struggling day to day, yeah, a lot of people have gone and given their, said, well, let's roll the dice with some of these far right parties. Much more far right than the alternative for Germany, by the way. The alternative for Germany is more of a Eurosceptic party. Eurosceptic, for those of you that don't know, are parties that are in Europe that believe that the European Union is intrusive and is a government that will ultimately limit the freedoms of the European people and end their identities. So before that, there was a far right that was more nationalist, more anti-immigrant than even them, more anti-Jewish in some cases, also anti-Gypsy. So Germany's kind of wrestled with that, but I think today, with this huge gain on the part of the Alternative for Germany party, we've seen that they can't continue to live in this bubble where they can just say, oh, multiculturalism is the answer for everything, because it just hasn't worked. It just hasn't worked. These people, they know that they are being swamped by an immigration wave that hasn't been to their benefit. They're being asked to sacrifice more and more by an elite group of people that don't really care about their needs. So they're rebelling, and there's not much that we can complain about as far as, oh, you're too right-wing. Well, maybe we wouldn't be so right-wing if you gave a shit about what we're going through. We don't get to live in these protected, gated communities and have security. And in some cases, we can't even find a job. And our healthcare system is being overrun. And in many cases, in some of our communities, they've been completely dilapidated since the country reunited. Why can't we, as citizens of this country, also have a say in our matters? Why do we have to bow to this new United States of Europe idea that's being tossed around? Well, from now on, the CDU, which is it's still the ruling party. They still won the election. They are going to continue to be in government, and there's not much that Germans can do about that. But people have to understand that this illusion that all Germans are on board with this united Europe is thrown to the trash, because not only did the Alternative for Germany win 13.8% of votes, which is their first time running in a federal election, but you also had the Left Party, which is also kind of a Eurosceptic party. They won almost 10% of the votes. So you have a good quarter of the Germans are starting to call bullshit on the whole idea of United States of Europe. And there's entire provinces of Germany. I think that, well, in Germany they call them states. But there's entire states of Germany that have basically gone over to the Alternative for Germany party. And, they're just going to be more of a factor from now on. And they can no longer say that it's only the British, or it's only some of these fringe parties in some of these southern European states that are opposing the integration of Europe. Now, in Germany, the most central state in the European Union, there is a major statement from the voters that they're not trusting this movement anymore. They are. It's the same thing that happened. It's not a total victory, but it is a milestone on the way to the fall of the European Union. The same thing happened earlier this year in the Netherlands and France. Now, I predicted in both cases that in neither situation would the Eurosceptic party win. Not in France, where Marine Le Pen won and got to the second round. She came in second place. And also not in Holland, but many people were calling victory for both of those cases. Well, how is it a victory when you see most of the mainstream left leaders in both of those countries that they completely fell apart? In Germany, in France, which had been under a socialist president, the socialists fell apart completely. I think their presidential candidate came in 6th or 7th place. In France, also, I think 3 of the 4 top vote getters were right-wing parties. Technically, the National Front, which is Le Pen's party, could be considered left-wing economically. They have very socialist pro-state policies. They're just hugely anti-immigrant. So by that one issue, they're considered right-wing, and therefore the majority of the French voted categorically against socialist policies or against immigration. So you can pick either issue. Either they are for freeing their economy much more, or they're against immigration. You have to confront either one, head on. Either you acknowledge that the French have had enough of immigration, or you know that they have had enough of socialism. And I think that they are linked, because the more people you bring in a socialist country, the more that the taxpayer has to cover. In Holland, you also saw, let me see here. General election 2017. So what are they called? The Party for Freedom, led by Geert Wilders, they also won 13%. Now, 13% isn't much, but the leading party won 21%. So they came only 8% behind the leading party in a field of, 10 or 15 different parties. And to tell you the truth, the majority of the other leading parties were either Eurosceptic or they were center-right. One of the other ones was there was a liberal party that was pro-European. They also won 6 seats, or they won 12%. But then you had the Christian Democratic Appeal. So they were a mildly right-wing party. Then you had the Green Left. They all came in behind him. I mean, these parties that were running against all these parties that were running against Wilders, they kind of fell by the wayside. There's this Christian Union. They're also Eurosceptic. And, the leading party, they lost 8 seats. Okay, Wilders gained 5. And, the other effect that it had was that the Labour Party in Holland lost 29 seats. Okay, so they went from having 38 seats to having 29. And basically the ruling coalition now is basically not, there's, they have to scrabble together with a smaller amount of people. That's what I'm trying to say, that you know, what happens is when you have a proportional representation system, okay? Sorry if I was getting a little disjointed here, but when you have a proportional representation system, usually what happens is you have to have a coalition government. So the main party will end up being the one with the most seats usually. And they have to cobble together a coalition of a majority in the House of Representatives or whatever it would be, you know, the parliament. And they end up taking power and, you know, forming laws, and they have to come to a consensus. So the cabinet they'll have a debate, and then they'll decide which laws they want or which policies they want. And you have to have a policy of consensus, at least within the coalition. Well, when the coalition has far fewer seats, it's much more difficult to successfully govern. Why? Because each party that's a member of the coalition can at any point say, well, you know, I feel like I have big balls, and how about if you don't give us this budget for, you know, new sewers or whatever it is. I just got my new sewer bill today. Say congratulations, my first sewer bill. We want new sewers. If you don't give us new sewers, we're going to quit. Well, they have to give in, or they have to dissolve the coalition. They have to attract a new member from the opposition and say, hey, these people are quitting, you can come in. And you know, it's a balancing act. That's the politics of proportional representation, which a lot of people want in the United States. A lot of people, especially on the far left, you know, the Bernie Sanders people, they say, well, if we have proportional representation, at least we would be represented. They have a point, I think. At the moment, they're not represented at all. What would happen if they were represented proportionally is it would be a little more difficult for the Democrats to govern, because they would constantly be trying to appease these people on their own fringe, and their governments would fall. Also, it would be very difficult for these people to deal with a Republican government. So the last issue, I'm glad I was able to cover everything, but these NFL protests, okay, I didn't want to spend too much time on them. But honestly, you know, I was saying earlier when, you know, in take one of this broadcast, that after a whole day where I didn't really see much football, I did try to log on and watch one game on NBC, the Washington-Oakland game, which I saw that Oakland was getting their asses kicked last I checked. And they still are. What an embarrassment. And I hate Washington, so I know that Angel was watching, so congratulations to you. This protest, though, has definitely reaped some bitter fruit for the NFL already. So let's look at some NFL ratings issues. So this, I don't know if this is before the current weekend or not, but Donald Trump basically called for a you know, a boycott by the viewers of the NFL, and PolitiFact has already rated his claim that its ratings are way down as mostly false. Now that is a lot of you know, that's a lot of bullshit from PolitiFact. Okay, they want to talk about things that are that they should know about. Maybe they should not deal with ratings, which is something that Donald Trump knows everything about. He knows Donald Trump. If there's anything that he's knowledgeable about, it's TV ratings. And they basically were saying, well, he's wrong because he's attributing it to these players that are protesting. That's why the ratings are down. They're not trying to say that the ratings are not down. So PolitiFact says, we'll begin by saying that the numbers for 2017 so far are inconclusive. And then advertising age media reporter Anthony Gruppe said that the estimated decline of around 9% in ratings since last year, although the only window to face a significant decline was the 1 p.m. regional games. And then he said that there's only full data for the first 2 weeks of the season, the first of which was likely impacted by Hurricane Irma, making the data set too small to draw any conclusions. Average attendance for 2017 thus far is also down by 5%, while gross attendance is off 8% from 2016. Trump might be referring to 2016, a year when the NFL saw a significant drop in viewership, although average game attendance increased by 3% from 2015 to 2016. According to ESPN, NFL game broadcasters saw an average year-on-year drop in television viewership last season of 8%. Fox saw the lowest ratings since 2008, and ESPN since 2005. But that excluded Thursday night football games, which Paulson said likely would lower the percentage in alternate viewing platforms. So then, why the drop? Trump spokesman Steve Chung pointed to a Seton Hall sports poll that found that 56% of 841 respondents cited players not standing for the national anthem as a reason for last year's ratings drop. But as CNN pointed out, the poll asked why other people, rather than respondents, aren't watching football. About half the people polled said they either follow sports not closely or not at all. But coverage of Kaepernick's kneeling was widely covered by the media. Among the 12% who watch less sports, 26% of them say national anthem protests are to blame. However, those respondents reflect only 3% of the full nationwide sample. Various pundits criticized the survey results as negligible, pointing out that for every one person turned off by protests, 10 NFL fans tuned in. If a larger share of respondents claimed they watched more NFL, the fact that NFL ratings were actually down last year is good enough reason to discard this survey as meaningless. They're trying to say, this has nothing to do, there's not enough results and there's not enough conclusive evidence. Look, if you go to some of the images of the 49ers-Rams game, let's just talk about that one part. This is from Business Insider. Okay, so don't tell me that there's no attendance issue and that there's no ratings issue. It says here the NFL is getting hammered after another game was played in a half-empty stadium. So this is 49ers Levi Stadium over in Santa Monica. And this was actually a good game with a shootout and everything. But, there was a little more of a viewership. But the game had poor attendance. Shots of the stadium like the one above made clear attendance was dismal for the primetime game. Despite claims that attendance was over 70,000, anyone with eyes could see that the stadium was largely empty, with even some of the best seats in the lower bowl left untaken. And tickets were available on the secondary market for just $14, about the price of a beer and a hot dog inside the stadium. And still, few people found the time to support the Niners in person. People on the internet took notice, inspiring headlines including the 49ers and Rams played a great game in front of an empty stadium. And it appears not many people are physically at the 49. So, this is an embarrassment to the league. And it's going to continue to be an embarrassment. If you keep seeing, all of this, you have California. There are 4 teams currently, and 3 of them are just getting shitty attendance numbers. This is the Chargers. This is the Rams. The Niners you already saw. I'm sorry to say this, but the state of California, this massive population is not conducive for a huge NFL audience. And these protests are just going to keep making it worse, because in these cities there's such a diversity of social life, and people can basically do whatever they want with their free time. These football games aren't really that much of an event in many times. It showed on the other screen. Yes, it was the USC versus Texas attendance, which was 84,715. 714. So many people will just turn out for a good college football game. Why do they need to turn into the NFL? Why do they even have to come to an NFL game when the best ticket in town is college football? You have two football teams, USC and UCLA, and they're not going to go on the same weekend to a pro football game. I mean, they might, but if they're not getting as good of a product, remember now, I think the Rams do have a 2-1 record as of today, because they did beat the Niners. I think they won last week as well. The Chargers have an 0-3 record. The who was I going to say? The Chargers have an 0-3 record. The Niners have an 0-3 record. The Raiders are currently just getting, destroyed. In the third quarter, it's 21-0. Washington. I mean, good grief. And that would make them a 1-2 team. So I'm asking you, or no, maybe it would make them a 2-1 team. I mean, Washington just missed a field goal. But people are not going to go to these games if these teams are awful and if most of the show is political. So today was just astounding. I mean, I'm at work. I'm following these games on game tracking, which is, it sucks. But it was more important for me to go and catch up on work today than to watch football. And it's not as if this is the first season when that happened. There a lot of work that I miss from, being off of work during the holidays or whatever. And I go into work and I'll catch up on football later. So I don't think that I'm a person who's affecting this, but there's plenty of people out and their Patriots is just a passing phase in terms of people objecting to the national anthem protests. So the big losers of the day are, of course, the teams that were, they went into it. For example, the Steelers. They had only one person show up to stand for the anthem. I think his name was Danny Villanueva, who's I think he's an Iraq war vet. He's an Army Ranger vet. He went and stood there. The rest of the team stayed in the locker room for the anthem. What did they do? They fell behind. I think it was like 17-7. They came back and tied it to go into overtime, and then they blew it. They let the Bears win on a rushing touchdown. So they lost the game on one of these days when they put themselves on the spot trying to make a statement. Oh, we oppose Donald Trump and what he said about the national anthem protest. Well, maybe you should have focused on winning the game against an opponent that was clearly not as good as you today than making some sort of bullshit statement. In London, I saw very early. I was watching on my phone some of the highlights. There was the Jaguars against the Ravens. The Ravens just fell completely apart. A lot of them were kneeling during the U.S. national anthem, but standing during the British national anthem. A very ironic statement from them. And of course, Ravens just got torched, destroyed by a Jaguars team that, to be honest with you, I think they're schizophrenic. One week they're hot, the other week they're cold. But the team that comes out losing, if they were in on the protests, are going to get just destroyed on social media. Their fans are just going to trash them to no end. They have no hope of getting a reprieve because the people that are buying tickets, for the most part, either don't care about the protests or they may even be opposed to them. Now, am I saying that all the ticket holders or the people that go to the stadium or the people that are watching on TV are against the protest? Of course not. But it's such a substantial portion of people that don't support the protest that are tuning out or expressing their displeasure with it, that they are running on very thin ice. You're not getting more fans by protesting. You're scaring away some fans. So eventually, you're losing your pool of revenue. There's less people who are going to be buying your stuff. There's less people who are going to be coming to the game. Less people are going to be tweeting about the game. There's less people going to be watching at home. There's going to be less people tuning into all the shows that are about the NFL. People are just going to tune out, and it's really been obvious since the beginning of the season that, despite what PolitiFact says, this bullshit about, that it's mostly false that attendance is down. Attendance is down, and it's not just because of the protest, but the protest is one of the factors. One of the other factors is that these teams have moved to markets that don't deserve an NFL team. LA is a market that doesn't deserve a pro football team. I'm sorry to say it, but they can build the nicest stadium in the world and their fans wouldn't appreciate it. Haven't you learned from the way that they treat their basketball teams? I mean, isn't that enough? But no, they want two football teams in LA because potentially it's the second best football market. Well, in the best football market in the country, Jets and the Giants. And the Jets did get a win today. It was against a Dolphins team that kind of fell apart. So good for them. I have a few Jet fan friends. One of them was actually helping with me with the Bold Like a Leopard stuff on Facebook for a while. So, congratulations to them and their fans. The other team, the Giants, they kind of have a lot of soul searching to do. They had a huge comeback today. They were down 14-0. They came back and tied it, and then went ahead 21-14. Then they gave up a touchdown to the Eagles. And then they got a field goal to go ahead. Then they gave up a field goal to go into overtime, and then they lost the game. No, they didn't even go into overtime. They just lost the game. They let the Eagles get the go-ahead field goal with a few seconds left. It was like a 60-plus yard field goal. So the Giants, whose owners were very vocal, now have an 0-3 football team with a quarterback that's been throwing interceptions as if he's some sort of Santa Claus for defensive backs. And they're, like I said, they're 0-3. They don't have much positive going for them. Yet the owner starts, these owners are starting to think, oh, we can get ahead of this. We can placate the protesters, and then we can attack Donald Trump. Well, in this case, nobody's going to give a fuck how much you're virtue signaling. It's the same as in San Francisco. If your team is not winning football games, nobody's going to give a shit how nice of a statement you're making. I think they all got booed in Indianapolis. I think if they did this in Cleveland, they'd probably also get booed by a lot of the fans. I don't know about all the fans, but a lot of them. So, and once you start crossing that threshold where more people they don't attend games and they're being played in front of empty stadiums, then, all the other issues are going to crop up. Lionel Nation mentioned today the CTE, the concussions. That's going to be a huge, huge issue going forward, because once you get into all the off the field stuff, you have to get into all the off the field stuff. And the concussion issue, the NFL will no longer be able to ignore, because they're already focused on bullshit that nobody cares about. Look, this is a league that at the same time that they're promoting this national anthem, they're saying, oh, people should be able to say whatever they want. And I'm Roger Goodell. I believe in freedom of speech. Well, this is a guy, he's trying to fight in court to suspend Ezekiel Elliott, Dallas Cowboys guy, but Ezekiel Elliott for a crime that he was never charged for. Okay, so think about that. It was a crime that he was never charged for. The police released statements that they don't believe that the victim was credible at all. In fact, they found evidence that she'd fabricated the charges. And he's going to court in order to uphold a suspension, and he's losing all the time. And then he turns around and pretends that he's actually in favor of the players. So that's about it. You know, I talked a lot. Thank you, Angel. I think there was one other person for tuning in. You know, the rest of your weekend, whatever 2 or 1.5 hours left, that it goes swell. I'm going to be going. I'll check in on the game. I'll probably watch a little movie later. And we'll be in touch this week. So have a great evening.